The doors of the Central Bank of Iraq creaked open in the early hours of March 18, 2003, just hours before the US invasion. When bankers heard the echo of numerous boots, they knew who had entered their bank. Silence and fear captured their hearts as they saw their dictator's favourite son approaching a desk with a presidential note in his hand. He confidentially gave the note to the trembling manager, who nodded his head and led Saddam Hussein toward the hall, where he was going to do the biggest heist of human history. This wasn't a heist in the Hollywood sense, as there were no guns and no masks. In fact, it was the story of betrayal, dictatorship, and survival. To understand how this heist was possible, you have to know Saddam's Iraq. Saddam Hussein was born in 1937 in Al-Auja, a small, impoverished village near Tikrit in northern Iraq. The village was a harsh place, as it was dry, poor, and bound by tribal loyalties. Saddam's father either died or disappeared before he was born, and his mother, overwhelmed by hardship, briefly abandoned him to the care of relatives. These early years of rejection, violence, and scarcity deeply shaped his worldview. The young Saddam grew up with a sense that survival meant crushing enemies before they crushed him. From these humble and bitter beginnings, Saddam carried both a burning ambition and a ruthless instinct for power. He became involved in politics early, aligning himself with the Ba'ath Party. Here, Saddam's rise through its ranks was marked not by intellect or diplomacy, but by a cold-blooded ability to intimidate, punish, and remove rivals. By the late 1960s, Saddam had become a central figure in the Ba'athist government. Officially, he was second in command to President Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr. But in reality, Saddam already controlled the state's intelligence services, the military, and the party apparatus. In 1979, al-Bakr was forced into retirement, and Saddam formally seized the presidency. His first act as president was a chilling preview of his rule. During a televised Ba'ath Party meeting, he accused dozens of members of treason, had them dragged out, and later executed. From that moment forward, Saddam ruled Iraq with fear as his most reliable weapon. Almost immediately, Saddam's leadership was marked by devastating wars. In 1980, he started the Iran-Iraq War that continued for 8 years and financially destroyed Iraq. Their miserable condition wasn't enough for Saddam to stop. In 1990, he invaded Kuwait, claiming it was historically Iraq's territory. But this miscalculation brought the full force of the US-led coalition against him in the Gulf War of 1991. Iraq's military was crushed, its infrastructure bombed, and crippling sanctions imposed. Millions of Iraqis became poor and started their fight for survival. They had no money, no home, and no food. This condition loosened the reins of Saddam on his country, so he decided to start his survival war too. He knew that Iraqis and the world had had enough of him, and any time he would lose in the war. So he had to do something to keep him safe. So he turned toward the finances of Iraq. Sanctions and wars had cut Iraq off from the global financial system, so there were no foreign accounts and no international transfers. That's why Saddam kept his fortune the old-fashioned way. It means in cash. His loyals used to stack billions of dollars in boxes, then wrapped in plastic, and buried in the underground vaults of Baghdad. For this, the Central Bank of Iraq became the obvious target. It held nearly $1 billion in cash reserves, including US dollars and Iraqi dinars. It was supposed to be a public place where taxes and Iraqis' hard-earned money was present. But for Saddam, it became his piggy box. Saddam had spent years planting trusted loyalists inside the central bank. They were military officers, intelligence agents, and allies trained to understand its security systems. They studied the vaults, alarm systems, and protocols, waiting for the right moment. His plan, codenamed Crescent Storm, relied on precision and secrecy. In March 2003, as US bombs fell on Baghdad, Saddam sent his son Qusay to steal all the money from the central bank. Disguised as civilian contractors, Saddam's operatives moved silently through the halls. Qusay gave the note to the trembling banker, who nodded his head and told them where the whole Iraq's money was stored. Here, we are talking about $920 million. These were the only money that was sustaining Iraq's economy. Within minutes, Saddam's loyals neutralized cameras, alarms and locks, rendering the impenetrable vault defenseless. For the next 5 hours, no sounds were in the central bank, but the echo of boots on marble floors and the steady rustle of currency as men packed billions into burlap sacks and metal trunks. Stacks of US dollars, still crisp from the mint, were dragged out of vaults and piled like bricks of gold. Outside, a convoy of trucks idled behind the iron gates, their engines humming in the darkness. Each load was carried in silence, soldiers and bankers alike knowing that hesitation meant death. In those hours, the Central Bank of Iraq was emptied not by foreign invaders, but by the president's own son. The convoy did not dare take Baghdad's main avenues. Instead, it wound through back streets, slipping past neighbourhoods that slept uneasily under the threat of war. Military checkpoints were carefully avoided. Saddam's men had mapped out escape routes months in advance, anticipating the chaos to come. Each truck carried not just money, but the desperate hope of a collapsing regime clinging to its last resource. As dawn crept over the horizon, the trucks reached their destination, a fortified underground warehouse on the outskirts of Baghdad. To the outside world, it appeared to be nothing more than an abandoned military depot, a relic of past conflicts. But beneath its concrete shell lay a labyrinth of reinforced chambers, built years earlier as part of Saddam's elaborate contingency plans. There, the fortune was unloaded, stacked again into mountains of green, and sealed away from prying eyes. Guards loyal to Qusay were stationed at every corner, their orders clear. This money was not to be touched, not to be spoken of, and never to be traced. In the weeks that followed, the warehouse became a staging ground. The fortune was divided into smaller shipments, smuggled out through trusted couriers, and hidden in safe houses across Iraq and beyond. Some would vanish into Syria, some into Jordan, and some would be lost forever. Weeks after this betrayal, Baghdad started burning under US bombardment, and Saddam's statues were dragged through the streets. When the US military took over Iraq, the world came to know about the billion-dollar disappearance. This news hit like an earthquake. The world was stunned, questioning how nearly $1 billion vanished overnight, under the watch of one of the most tightly controlled regimes on Earth. Almost immediately, the hunt began. American soldiers stormed the central bank's empty vaults, only to find cold concrete floors where mountains of money once stood. Investigators scrambled to trace the cash, but every lead dissolved into rumour and shadows. Theories multiplied like wildfire. Some claimed Saddam had personally overseen the transfer, slipping away with his fortune in a convoy disguised as refugees. Others insisted disloyal insiders had betrayed him, stealing the treasure for themselves as the regime collapsed. The media was getting insane with theories, and the US military was losing their minds while tracking that money. They launched frantic searches. Special forces raided warehouses, palaces, even farmhouses, guided by intelligence reports that promised the money was here. But these leads were not taking them anywhere. On different occasions, they uncovered bundles of US currency, wrapped in plastic, and buried beneath the sand. Yet these discoveries were only fragments. The vast majority of the $920 million had vanished into the smoke of war. The interesting story here was how the US military uncovered these small fractions of money. Saddam made one fatal miscalculation while doing this heist. His empire of fear depended on his presence. Once the regime fell, the glue that held his network together dissolved. Loyalty turned into suspicion, and suspicion into bloodshed. The men who had once pledged their lives to protect Saddam's treasure began to eye it as their own ticket to survival. Rumours spread of secret caches being carved up in the dead of night. Families of loyalists were hunted, tortured, or assassinated by rivals eager to pry information from them. Safe houses that once served as waypoints became battlegrounds. This chaos gave the US military some leads. They uncovered some hidden Saddam's palaces. There, behind false walls, under floors, hidden in secret compartments, lay a staggering sum: $650 million in cash. Bricks of $100 bills stacked floor to ceiling. A mountain of money unlike anything soldiers had ever seen. But this recovery left a mystery. Where is the other $250 million? Though Saddam was eventually captured in December 2003 and later executed, the fate of the stolen money remains one of history's great mysteries. Everyone gave wild theories regarding it, but no one knew for sure where it was. What are your thoughts about this heist? Do share with us in the comments section.